Well, good morning and happy new year. It's been a strange start to the year, that's for sure, and maybe not the new year that many of us had hoped for and longed for. But there are some things that remain the same for us this year. I say often to our folks at Liberti Church that suffering, pain, but also hope and joy don't obey the rules of Roman calendars. Just because it shifts into a new year, it doesn't mean that they become any more or less intense for us. And the same can be said of Jesus. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. We're still in John's gospel, and last year we left off seeing Jesus as the light of the world, the one who truly helps us see. And what we need to see is ourselves, to see our problem with sin and our separation from God without Jesus, but also to see Jesus for who he is, to see that he is truly the Christ, the one who has come to save us from our sin and bring us into a renewed relationship with God. And this morning we see that as he brings light, he helps us to see truth. He's talking to some of the Jews in John chapter 8, and he says this to them: "If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." This statement from Jesus is set within a bit of a narrative of him talking about what freedom is and what slavery is. He tells the Jews that they are enslaved, that they haven't yet found true freedom, that they think just because they are biological sons of Abraham that they have inherited some sort of biological freedom, but they haven't. True freedom in this world and in eternity comes only through knowing Jesus and being his disciple. And Jesus says specifically by abiding in his word. That's how we know who are Jesus' disciples, by those who abide in his word. That word abide means to remain, to stay, to not depart from. And so we need to ask ourselves that question this morning. If we say that we are Jesus' disciples, are we staying in his word? Are we remaining in truth? That's what his word is. It is truth for us. It is a collection of absolute truths, truths that we can build our lives on, truths that he has given us to truly flourish and to walk in the freedom that he has brought us into. See, the world that we live in would say actual freedom. If you really want freedom, it doesn't mean being constrained by rules and regulations and commands and by submitting to someone. No, true freedom is doing what you want, but Jesus says that is just walking further and further into slavery. Because what we want, if we follow our desires, we will lead ourselves deeper into darkness. Because all of our desires outside of God are inclined towards sin. And sin leads to death. When Jesus comes, when we become his disciples, he changes our desires. He changes our hearts. And he allows us to walk into true freedom. Yes, a life that does have boundaries. A life that does have us submit to commands and obligations and rules. A life that has us submit to somebody as our greater authority. But it is a life of true freedom. Because the desires that we now follow don't lead us deeper and deeper into sin and darkness, but they lead us deeper and deeper into light and life. Because they bring us more into the likeness of Jesus. And we see our fellowship with God in much greater ways. We see ourselves in much greater ways than we did before, and we see God in much greater ways than we did before. Jesus ends this time of discourse with the Jews, and he says this: "If the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." Jesus has come to free us, to liberate us from our slavery to sin, and to bring us into true freedom. But only he can do that. Only the perfect, righteous Son of God can liberate us from our sin, from death, and from the devil. And so we'll hear about more next week. We fall into one of two camps. Either we are for God or we are for his enemies. Jesus has come as the great liberator, the one who brings us freedom, who leads us into truth, the one whose disciples will remain in his truth, will abide in his truth, and will walk in true freedom.